Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure I announce that we have finished every single raid that Guild Wars 2 has to offer. We have hit our milestone in Project MMO. And as far as we know, there will never be any more raids for this game. So it's time to go in, it's time to assess, and it's time to understand why raids disappeared from this game. Let's go. Let's get into this. In the previous video, we covered the first 4 wings that Guild Wars 2 decided to add raids into their game and how they felt. And they were all over the place. Difficulty was just completely at random. Really creative ideas, really terrible ideas. These trash things that they came up with in between the bosses that turned into a whole thing. And I was wondering, as we moved into the later game, 5, 6, and 7, the last 3 raid wings, were they going to learn? Were they going to keep changing? But things that we do know now, heading into there, people were not taking part in their raids. They just weren't popular. Way, way, way less popular than something like Mythic in World of Warcraft. People just weren't doing them. In fact, it's one of the least achieved things in Guild Wars 2 is their raid content, despite the fact it's been out there for so long. And it's not surprising. It's such a mixed bag. They have some extraordinary ideas that they want to throw in there right next to like, ugh. And also, for the most part, a lot of people seemingly do not understand how Guild Wars 2 works with its massive, massive boon system that dramatically increases your player DPS, output, healing, survivability, all that stuff is so increased if you understand this system, but it's not relevant to the average player in the open world, and ultimately Guild Wars 2 is designed to be a relatively solo experience. So, let's get started with Wing 5. Wing 5 was something I was a little bit dreading. After coming out of Wing 4 and dealing with some decent bosses, this roller coaster idea could take us in many directions, but Wing 5's first boss quickly allayed my fears. The Soulless horror, great encounter. Absolutely tremendous. This was the first time I actually had to tank. I had to quickly go to the market board, buy myself a whole toughness set, do it as a Vindicator, and pick up how to tank, because they had these things on the floor that when you click them, you gain a tank action key. So me and the other tank got in there. And this fight was very reminiscent of the Sartharian encounter in Wrath of the Lich King of World of Warcraft. We've got the firewalls moving across. We've got various ads coming in, dealing with different things. And one thing I enjoyed about this was the amount of movement. We really had to move as one smooth ball, but not in the way of a predictable dance fight, which I typically don't enjoy. It was more a case of assessing a constantly changing room. This place is always giving you so much area denial that you've got to keep moving left, right, where's the firewalls? Admittedly, sometimes we got firewall and other area denial combinations, which felt very, very unfair compared to what else could spawn in the fight. But having some good tanking coordination, bringing me back to my old tanking days, which I'd done for like 15 years, this was a great encounter. I rate it 7 out of 10. This was a wonderful start to Wing 5. But then
they did it again with the trash. I actually can't believe it. The River of Souls, a trash gauntlet that wipes you if people die, and you have to do it all again. Why?
Then it got weird. Then it got really, really strange. Following the Nightmare of the River of Souls, we entered into just a giant open space and do something in there. We had clues. It was like you have to activate some stuff to get some things happening, and all we could see is just platforms off in the distance. But then we remembered, of course, we can mount in raids, which is super useful. So we could fly, and we could use our jackals, and we could glide and do all kinds of things like that. And then we found that there were a couple of bosses located off in the distance that we could do in any order. I'm going to start with the Broken King, the big frost boss. One thing I really hate, and it is absolutely kind of my World of Warcraft days, and I'm really sorry for anybody who doesn't mind this stuff. I'm not sorry, actually. It just sucks. It's controlled DPS. I can't stand it. It's so boring. I want to smash things in the face with my giant greatsword. It's why I have a giant greatsword. This fight works on the basis that every 2% health, he's going to drop things on the floor. They also have to be soaked, but if you do them too quickly, then you get too many debuffs and you die. So you kind of do a slow, steady DPS, at least at your first kill. Yes, there are people speedrunning these fights. We know. We're all very proud. Namaste. But for your first kill, remember, we do all these blind. We have no idea what these bosses do. Everybody in the raid is completely blind to how these fights work. It was It was boring. It was so boring. I hated this fight. 3 out of 10. Get out of here. Vice versa, though, on the other side of the room was the Eater of Souls. The absolute opposite type of fight. I adore this. This was fantastic. Why? Not only were the mechanics kind of understandable, it had some complexity to it. It taught you how to do the next boss with the flying in the air mechanic that goes on here. But more importantly, and I really adore raid fights that do this, you don't instantly wipe if you do things wrong. I cannot tell you how much I love this, even for reasonably difficult fights. This is not a super hard fight, but there is a lot going on. A lot of people have to be coordinating into little groups, who's going to go where, who's going to CC this, who's going to throw the balls and to activate the pillars, and then we have to drag the boss on top of the pillar. We can only DPS him there. It has to be timed right with when his CC bar. All this stuff is great because if you don't do it, the fight just carries on and you get another go at it. And this meant that we got some good information there to try things. I love this. It's like, oh, that's not working. Let's try something else. Okay, that didn't work either. Let's try something else. And within only a couple of pulls, you're starting to paint a picture of how this fight should work. And that makes it an 8 out of 10 in my eyes. A 3 out of 10 for our Frost Boy, 8 out of 10 for the Thung and the Broken King.
And now there's this thing with an eyeball where you have to stand in the dark and throw an eyeball. And it takes ages. And I just don't get why.
The door opens and we are about to face what I would consider our first real end boss in Guild Wars 2. This is Dhuum, who I now know is kind of known throughout the community as the big boy. This is one of the big boys in the game. Now, we have fought Deimos and the other wings. He is kind of a reasonable end boss, but Dhuum is on a whole nother level. Completely, obviously inspired by Kel'Thuzad from World of Warcraft. I don't blame them at all, taking the idea of Kel'Thuzad from Naxxramas, and then what would that look like in a modern era? And realistically, it probably looks like Dhuum. This was the most pulls that we've had to do to kill a boss so far. I think it ended up in around 45 to 50 in order to defeat this boss over a couple of days. Big shout outs to the raiders who stuck it out because we were here for a long time and we weren't pulling. It was like, okay, what do we do here? A lot of eyeballs and very, very difficult as a raid leader to see all the elements. That's great and also a little frustrating, but this is what inspires a lot of teamwork. It's why I love raiding, is like seeing people is like, I noticed this, but I noticed this over here. So we had people and I ended up being assigned to fly up into the air and pick up these orbs. And then we realized this is where the communication comes in. So an idea of the mechanic in this fight is some people get thrown up into the air and then you're in like a ghost realm where you have to pick up a certain amount of orbs in a certain amount of time without touching the middle or you get instantly killed. If you take too long, you get instantly killed. But then, you know, it's like, hey, there's a big orb and there's a different sized orb. And then it's up to the team downstairs to say, whoa. You guys did something different because these really scary ads that we've been dealing with downstairs while you guys are flying up didn't appear. And then we get the link. It's like, oh, the big orbs link to big ads. The other orbs deal are small ads, which you don't really care about. Medium orbs deal with these other things that somebody else is having to do by kiting those medium ads around. I didn't really have to do that. That upped my DPS. This is cool. If we can focus on these things happening, that's really great. And that feedback going back and forth was all the way through the fight. It's like tank positioning. Okay, well, this leads to a giant suck-in, which kills everybody. Okay, so we're going to be looking after this ghost element over here. Let's deal with that. Let's position the tank here. And that way we kind of fall into the natural safe place afterwards. And all the way through the fight was these little micro adjustments, which then led us to like getting the best pull we've had. And a surprise is waiting for you at 10% as well, where it throws an entirely new mechanic at you, and you've been fighting for a long time. This is like a 10-minute plus fight, which is a little bit unheard of these days in modern day raiding, is to have these colossal fights. You're only going to really see that in big end bosses. And recently, of course, the Sarkareth fight in the latest World of Warcraft raid was like 7.5 minutes. Like, they don't like, a lot of the seasoned raid developers don't like going over 10 minutes. And this was a long, exhausting endurance fight. So constantly the team was backing each other up. It's like, it's okay. Yeah, we got to focus for a really long time. We don't want to fall into the idea of the rhythm, although there is a certain set rhythm, which is somewhere this boss could be improved. If a little bit of randomness while keeping you engaged is a great thing. But once we got there and then we had this extra thing, it was like, okay, we're right at the end. Let's sit down and talk about how we're going to do this thing. Real progression talk. I give Dhuum 8 out of 10. Fucking get in! Oh, baby, baby! Wonderfully done. Absolutely wonderfully done.
Let's go.
Freaking believable. So, are you guys telling me all I had to do was say last pull and you guys would kill it? Well, if it wasn't so on rails for the first, like, 5 minutes, then it would have been a slightly higher, but an absolutely tremendous. No, I'm going to give it 9 out of 10. Yeah, this is a 9 out of 10 boss. This is pretty goddamn good. It's close to perfect for what an end raid boss should be. Overall, Wing 5, really good. Super let down by its trash, though. Didn't like that at all. And then, of course, we go to Wing 6, and they change it again. And this is what, for me, really led to, as the signals were there from the early raiding, but now we're starting to see the picture as time went on as to why raiding was dying a death and circling the drain. Wing 6 is really good. Like, it's really, really good. It's the first raid, I would say, had a very consistent theme all the way to it that married up to the boss design. And that's an important feature that you throw into your raids, is a really set theme. And what we had in the previous raids, I would describe more as super creative boss ideas and then trying to fit them into a raid. And it doesn't matter if, like, the scenario changes quite dramatically and then changes back, because the idea of the boss is interesting and creative. Now, I'm fine with that, but it certainly suits individual boss encounters more than an overall raid. Wing 6 did something wonderful. And there's no more trash. There's no more trash. Can you believe it? There's no more trash. Let's go to our first boss, Conjured Amalgamate. Again, the old switcheroo design, because we look at the Soulless Horror, very difficult fight to get right. Conjured Amalgamate, really easy. No one can predict what they're going to walk into, and linear progression and expected progression is a big aspect of raid guilds. A lot of raid guilds, especially the ones that stand the test of time, expect to get to a certain point so they can predict how much they're going to play, how much they're going to have to commit, all those kinds of things. And you cannot do that at any point in Guild Wars 2. You're either going to run into a wall or something's just going to fall over, and you don't know, which makes consistency very, very hard outside of the dedicated few to keep a guild interested. There are guilds, you know, if we look to Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft, who are like, oh, we expect to clear Heroic probably in X amount of time. That's the amount of commitment I can give to my MMO to raid with my friends. And then I know, generally speaking, when dealing with loved ones and people outside of the gaming world, that I'm probably going to be free again and not going to have to do too many raid nights. With Mythic, it's going to take this amount of time, etc., etc., etc. It feels like you can't do that with Guild Wars 2. Thankfully, the raids aren't super long. They're like usually 3 to 4 bosses. But ultimately, it's one of the things that like lets down a system is it's just inconsistent. Conjured Amalgamate was fun, very similar to Polygon, again from Ulduar and World of Warcraft. You can see the inspiration, not that they're the only guys who could do a giant guy with clapping hands, but ultimately it was kind of fun, gave you a huge damage boost. Once we really worked out how to do that damage boost properly, we were over damaging the boss, which I don't think is really a fun idea. Every time I've encountered a boss that has some sort of vulnerability phase or a extra damage taken phase, or you deal extra damage, whatever you want to say, but it has hard limits to make sure its mechanics happen, meaning that as you get better at the fight, that mechanic becomes less and less interesting because ultimately it's the uptime is really small and you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess the fight is going quicker kind of, but we like organize this very well. And we don't really see the benefit anymore. I personally prefer, if you're going to do a damage bonus, weakness, whatever, is that you let us kill the boss if we do it really, really well. Or you tune it so that it has to be done well in order to see the other phases. Not that it just hard cuts off. That's always a letdown in my eyes. Reminds me of Mistress Sazine in Tomb of Sargeras during the Legion expansion of World of Warcraft. Is that had a mechanic where you could pick and eat a fish and it gave you a damage bonus. But as your gear got better week after week, by the end of it, you were just picking it up to put it down so it wouldn't detonate and things like that because you didn't need the damage bonus. It actually caused more problems than needed. And therefore, this whole part of the fight just doesn't work. But either way, decent enough, easy first boss. This is more in line than what I'd expect with the first boss of a raid. So 6 out of 10 is where I'd go with that. But then we got on to Twin Largos. Super fun. Super, super fun. Beyond going through the little bit of trash, which was for fun, I enjoyed it. Distracting trash, not tedious. Chasing a shark through treasure packs is good. Twin Largos, I gathered after we killed this that people really, really like this fight and also consider it really difficult. We did not spend too much time on this. Yes, it was, you know, reasonable, maybe 20 pulls, something like that. But honestly, the thing that really drew me to this fight that made me enjoy it a lot was the separation of the team. So it follows a similar mantra that you would see in many boss encounters, certainly ones that have multiple bosses, is you fight one, then you fight the second one, and then you fight them both together. But this time it forces you to split the teams off, which fits Guild Wars 2's raiding style to a T, because boons and buffs are group-based, meaning that you could settle off Group 1 and Group 2. They were at their full power still in order to go at their bosses and learn to manipulate their bosses individually. And it creates a great, great atmosphere of Group 1 versus Group 2. Group 2 wipes. Group 1 stands victorious. They're cheering. It's like, oh, you guys struggle. And then the next pull, Group 1 files, and it's like, fails. And you're like, Group 2 is like, yeah, where's your Group 1 attitude now? Who killed their boss faster? Who's got much stronger DPS? And that healthy competition, I think, is something that makes raiding with friends so much more fun and enjoyable, which made Twin Largos a decent fight. The only thing I didn't particularly like about it was that some of the effects really were a little awkward, like the water and the bubbles and things like that. You could avoid them all. But occasionally they just get you and you're like, it's kind of annoying. And a lot of pushback and swish around, which kind of affects your DPS. But ultimately, I liked this fight. You had some ranged kiting going on. Decent enough. 7 out of 10. Then we get to, and I'm not going to beat about the bush here, the actual best raid fight that Guild Wars 2 has ever put forward in terms of its raids. This thing is extraordinary. This is the absolute pinnacle of raid design for Guild Wars 2. I know we haven't got to Wing 7 yet, but I don't care. I'm going to spoil it for you now. This is Qadim 1. Qadim 1. Now, Qadim 1 is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. They should be so proud of what they put forward with Qadim 1. And it has seemingly, in a raid that has like a 6 out of 10 and a 7 out of 10 boss, having a 10 out of 10 in there also plays into the like up and down that is Guild Wars 2 raiding. But goddamn, this is good. Why did I like it? Many, many phases, tons and tons of individual tasks. There's a reason Kel'Thuzad and Blast Furnace are my favorite ever World of Warcraft fights. A lot of people disagree with me on that, but that's what I like. And that's because everybody had something to do, which means even if it's a really long fight, and Qadim 1 is like 12 minutes or something, you're engaged for the whole thing. Now, that can be mentally exhausting, which is definitely the case. I think this took us the most pulls of every raid boss we did in Guild Wars 2. I think it got up to 75 pulls to defeat this. But everybody had to learn their own game. And for me, I ended up like progging this by doing near enough everybody's job at some point. We have an underground maze that happens 3 times and has different mazes. So we have that player literally drawing maps down there to try and figure out the best route through each of the mazes. We've then got 2 or 3 people on one side of the room managing the boss. Then we've got the rest of the raid having to learn 3 different independent bosses, mini bosses that spawn during the fight, then merging together back into a team to deal with separate mechanics. And we also then have the big surprise again at 10%, visually stunning, which is Guild Wars 2's massive strength. And one of the biggest letdowns I've had in Guild Wars 2 raiding, and I'll stand by this, is their lack of usage of their extraordinary ability to create so well animated giant bosses. They do it in the outer world every now and again, but in the raids, I haven't really seen them since Zera, and that makes me really, really sad. Like, Deimos had a go at it, but other than that, it's not been present, and I've really missed that. But this was manipulating the whole room into a jumping puzzle. Not difficult, but nice change of pace. And that pacing of a really long boss fight is so crucial. It was why I kind of docked Dhuum a point. The pacing is very important. If you're going to have a long fight, a really long fight, you have to respect the players who are engaged in this fight. Certainly if they've not signed up for the hardest of the hard modes, they're going to be tired. They're going to be, they're going to be a little worn out, and you need to have something just to break it up and change what they're doing. And doing a jumping puzzle, even though it's relatively simple, is a great idea, especially at the end of the fight where it just turns into kind of a blast the boss down once you finally get back there. And also the joy of like, we're getting the boss to like 11%. We think we're going to kill it. We've gone through all these phases and then boom, the whole rage shatters and goes away. Again, going to Kel'Thuzad. Kel'Thuzad rising into the center of the room, shattering it all, making you all float. The glass from the ceiling falling down. All those elements are present in Qadim 1. This is 10 out of 10. This is easily the best raid fight I ever did in Guild Wars 2. and it's superb. I can't say anything more about it. Book off, baby! Oh, there it is! God damn! Hot damn! That was a blast! An absolute blast. Like it. Not finished there though. Let's go to the final raid of Guild Wars 2. Now, I don't know when they got the message that we're probably not going to be continuing raids. And looking at the timeline, it's kind of been a weird time for ArenaNet. And it kind of shows. If I was to summarize Wing 7 before we get into this, one of the things I would describe it as, and again, I apologize to ArenaNet if this is not the case, but it's my impression after playing through it, not tested enough. I'm not going to say it was untested, because it was clearly tested, but it feels not tested enough, because it's a yo-yo of experiences that are going on here, a yo-yo of experiences, and it has some problems we're about to get into, which I think more testing would have revealed. And more feedback on these fights would have come back with, did you notice that this happens? So let's get started. So you have the choice of the first two bosses. We're going to start with Cardinal Adina, which was the rock boss. And the initial idea, and again, this is a theme of Wing 7. The concept is really good. The execution is a bit wonky. So Cardinal Adina has all these pillars, and you need pairs of players to break these pillars, because if any of the pillars survive when the Cardinal does her abilities, then the boss gains 20% HP. So you end up paired up with people. Again, love that. More teamwork, more directly working with someone, and later in the fight, we get to split the group in two and do all kinds of things like that. But the gimmick of the fight is the room is constantly changing shape, and more area denial is coming in with holes in the floor. But you can jump across them. And this means you have to really use the very clearly segmented tiles in order to pick out where's best for people to go, and have that all built into your brain so that as soon as this mechanic happens, you can all spread out appropriately. You know where you're going to go to get rid of your towers. All that kind of stuff is great. Where it falls down is this fight gets significantly easier as people die. Because the fight doesn't continue to produce as many pillars. And also, with the reduced amount of space in the room, less players, less pillars makes the fight easier. And regularly, we had prog fights. I think this probably took us about 13 or 14 pulls, where half the raid was dead, and it was pretty clear that the guys could just probably kill the boss because there was just so much less going on. It was as simple as that. There was less area denial to worry about. The space was just way less cramped, and their teams could work efficiently. It was fine. And that's not a good sign. It's not a good sign if the fight seemingly is easier if you would just remove like 4 players. I'm pretty sure Cardinal Adina 6-man is really, really simple. Maybe you don't meet some of the DPS checks, but I kind of think you do with the current power levels. So I give this fight like a 7 out of 10 generously because the concept is really good. But yeah, the drift off later. And then we went on to the other optional boss, which was Cardinal Sabir. Painfully easy. Again, more testing might have revealed like, yeah, this is cool. We have 3 major platforms to fight the boss. The boss gains a new mechanic each platform, but it's kind of really easy. We killed this boss in like 5 pulls or something, maybe less. And it's more flash than substance, which is really sad. More flash than substance. It looks spectacular, but it felt like a mini boss. 3 out of 10 for me. But then, of course, I've already kind of spoiled where we're going with this. We get to Qadim 2. Now, I would like to say I was surprised that Qadim returned. I was not, unfortunately, because after we kill a boss, because we do it blind, we do watch a guide on the boss to see if we missed any mechanics, how differently did we do this fight compared to what is considered the norm. Obviously, doing it blind, we develop our own strategies, and they don't usually, most of the time, they don't fit the mold. More recently, as we've got better at Guild Wars 2, they do. We try to kind of do it, figure how Guild Wars wants us to do it. But Qadim 2. What happened here just what happened here. And I don't mean to offend anybody who likes this fight, but God, I hated this. I hated this so much. It didn't even seem to fit how Guild Wars worked at first. Ultra spread out, people having to run and kite and do things, and linking chains. Now, again, similar to Cardinal Adina, the concept is kind of cool. You have these people all spread out, and then you have to manipulate these towers to create like links, like you were connecting power lines together. And these links give you buffs and protections, which you can apply to the boss, which make it so you DPS it. The first 2 minutes of this fight are the most difficult part of the fight. Then it's like 7 minutes of this fight getting continuously easier. To the point, this is not a lie, the first time we got past 40%, we killed the boss. And all of us, once the boss died, tried to go to the next boss because there was no way this was the last boss and we were all waiting for another phase.
Defense, then off.
Prepare for a weird loser phase. This might have a loser phase coming. We're ignoring this ad. Not sure if end of raid or Nups just came in and just clapped this raid because he god gamed it.
Now every Jinn shall be connected to Adishin and its energy. We will share the burden and the power. As your
Did we really just go from
champions
40% to 0 without having to learn anything? Is that the last boss? Oh, what's down here? Hold on. Is that really it? That's it. GG's? I guess. I can't say I feel happy. I don't. I'm never gonna lie. Yeah, that boss makes no sense to me at all. I don't know.
It's difficult for me to describe how disappointing an ending to Guild Wars 2 raiding Qadim 2 is. And in fact, Wing 7 kind of as a whole. That's why I feel like they got the message relatively early on that something was going to happen, or that this was the end, or people aren't going to play this anyway, so limited resources were thrown at it. It's hard to say. But there's something underneath the hood here that just didn't work out. Because, like I said, not tested enough. I kind of feel like if these raid bosses have been tested a lot, then people would have gone, yeah, but it's easier if more people die. And also, Qadim 2 is like way easier later in the fight. And the reason for that is Qadim starts to destroy the pillars that you're working so hard to manage. So you just don't manage them anymore. You just stand in a group because there's nowhere else for you to go. And Guild Wars 2 rewards you massively for standing in a group. So the more pillars he destroys, the just easier the fight gets. DPS increases through the roof. And off you go to Chinatown, just destroying the hell out of the place and just having a good old time. And that's the last raid we'll see from Guild Wars 2. What's my conclusion then on Guild Wars 2 raiding? A valiant effort to make something that should have fit into the game. They had to change the mold a little bit. The old "there's no holy trinity" clearly didn't work out, and they came up with a number of ways to fix that with toughness, so the boss automatically, you are a tank just because of your armor level, or just giving you straight up a mechanic that makes the boss fixate you, something along that, and having straight up healers in the game as well. So the holy trinity idea of not having it clearly didn't work, and they adapted around that. And then from there, it feels like a constant change of direction and focus onto what these raids should be. They launched Raid 1 in a simple style, and people quickly went in and then drifted away from it. So they tried something else with Wing 2, and then again with Wing 3. And we actually see it here as these raids go on, is Wing 5 overall, pretty difficult. You know, Soulless Horror and Dhuum, really, really great fights. Then we get to Wing 6, which is like overall significantly easier, but also contains one of the most difficult fights in the game that I've done so far anyway. And then we get to Wing 7, which is like falling on its butt. And you can kind of see where it's almost like the team's changed or the message, like, you know, when they sat down to like, okay, what is our goal with this next raid wing? What didn't people like in the last one? How can we adjust it here? How can we get more people inside? How can we make that happen? And it just leads to a kind of spaghetti fest where it's all over the place. Some bosses are just so creative and so wonderful. And then the next boss you fight is like, there. Like, why is this here? Why have we made this the end boss? Like, was Qadim received so well that we're going to make Qadim again, and they just didn't have the resources to do it because nobody's going to play this, and also like we're killing off raiding anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I'm overall left with like a bitter disappointment in that, one, they could not seem to find a nice straight road to go on with their raids. There are always going to be raids that veer left and right in terms of difficulty, enjoyment, reception, all those kind of things. That's going to happen. And then it should be gently pulled back into line because what we have with Guild Wars 2 raiding is this road that just veers hardcore to the right, like swerves on an oil slick, and then it comes back into line slightly, and then it goes off. And then it's like careering down the road like someone playing Mario Kart for the first time and constantly sort of struggling just to keep it on the tracks, and it just keeps going wrong. Like they're constantly being hit by bananas or something. And it's a real shame. But what I do know is the journey does not end here, because this is the end of Guild Wars 2's raiding in terms of raid wings, but they then move to a different system called strikes, which is similar to Final Fantasy XIV's Trials, something I particularly love, and it's something I hope World of Warcraft adopts more, considering they kind of did it earlier on with things like Onyxia, and we haven't seen it for a long time. Single boss encounters, you go in, you get a boss, have fun. And that's going to be part of Icebrood Saga, so I'm going to do them. I want to see whether that freedom to be like, hey, we don't need to mesh all these things into one raid. If we have a really creative idea for an encounter, we can just build that one encounter and go into it and have this whole new system. So I'm going to start checking that out and also checking into the challenge modes, which for some of these fights that I've probably rated really easily is something a little different. But yes, I've had some utterly tremendous raiding experiences in Guild Wars 2. The joy and cheer that I got from killing like Qadim 1 and Dhuum will stay with me. They were great. We were all so satisfied with what we did. And then other times when I wanted to pull my freaking hair out more than it's already gone while dealing with trash packs and bosses that do weird things and just generally like, ugh, at the end of it. What a weird roller coaster of it. But I'm glad I experienced it, and I want to see how they refined this outside of these constrictions. Thank you so much for watching, guys. See you again. Bye-bye.
There's no more trash. Pendog, there's no more trash. We're going to keep shooting until he looks at me. And there's no more trash. There's no more trash. Can you believe it? There's no more trash. Good boy. Yeah. Now he thinks I'm going to lie here and be his friend forever. Yeah. Got to go back to the office. Right, let me up. Let me up. Come on. Let me up. Let me up. Okay. All right. You can have a belly rub. You good? All right. I'm going. I'm going. You did a good performance. We're all very proud of you.